Random House Audio Roads presents The Hill Fights, the First Battle of Khe Sanh by Edward F. Murphy. Read for you by Charles Stransky. On a hot, humid day in late September 1966, Lieutenant General Lewis W. Walt wore a deep scowl across his broad face. The commander of the 3rd Marine Amphibious Force, or 3MAF, which incorporated all Marines in South Vietnam, Walt held strong opinions on how his troops should be used to win the war. When that did not happen, the barrel-chested, volatile head of 3MAF got angry. Recently, the most frequent catalyst for Walt's fury was his superior, U.S. Army General William C. Westmoreland, the head of the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, MACV. Westmoreland had his own plans for using the Marines to fight and win the war in South Vietnam. All too often, these clashed with Walt's. The conflict between the Marines and their Army superior had been simmering for more than a year. Although trained since before World War II as a hard-hitting, beach-storming amphibious force, the Marines took a different approach to the war in South Vietnam. Ever since they landed at Da Nang in March 1965, the Marines had supported pacification efforts as the best way to win this war. Walt fully concurred with the statement made by Marine Corps Commandant General Wallace M. Greene, Jr., shortly after the Marines' initial landings. The real targets in Vietnam are not the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese, but the South Vietnamese people, Greene had declared. So strongly did Walt believe in this strategy that he approved a number of innovative programs to rid the native villages of their insurgent infrastructure and make the South Vietnamese people feel safe in their homes. But this emphasis on pacification programs did not mean that Walt possessed an unwillingness to engage the enemy in full combat. Indeed, quite the contrary was true. But he recognized that the civil war in South Vietnam would not be won by the Marines' historic method of wresting terrain objectives from the enemy's armies. In his view, if the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army were to be vanquished, it would happen only if the people wanted it to happen, and the only way to get them to want that was to allow them to feel safe in their villages. General Westmoreland, however, had different plans for fighting this war. Although he acknowledged the benefits of pacification, Westmoreland had focused his entire career on conducting conventional warfare. Indeed, he yearned for a major land battle where his superior firepower would decisively defeat the North Vietnamese, the NVA, and send them packing back to Hanoi. And the only way to achieve the traditional victory he had trained his whole life for was to send his troops where the enemy was, South Vietnam's rugged, mountainous interior border regions. But with his limited manpower resources, Westmoreland knew he could not protect the people and battle the enemy's main force units. He had to make a choice. His 1966 battle plan revealed that choice. According to his master plan for conducting the war, American troops, better trained and with greater firepower than the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, the ARVN, would conduct major search-and-destroy operations in the rural, unpopulated areas. Here, the combat units could find, fix, and destroy the enemy in his base areas. The ARVN would follow up with clearing operations, designed to ferret out any surviving guerrilla forces. Then the local militia units, or popular forces, would move in to provide a permanent defense for area villages. As far as Westmoreland was concerned, the Marines' preferred strategy for winning the war had been seriously downgraded. Walt, of course, did not concur. Then, in March 1966, Westmoreland received an intelligence report that reinforced his position. The NVA 324B Division had crossed the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, that separated the two countries. He ordered the Marines to send a full battalion to Khe Sanh and look for the enemy. Khe Sanh sits near the western end of National Route 9, the only east-west road that traverses northern South Vietnam. Route 9 begins at Dong Ha, a once sleepy village located 10 kilometers inland on a tributary of the Qua Viet River. A crossroads town, Dong Ha also straddles Route 1, South Vietnam's only north-south road. 60 kilometers separate Dong Ha and Khe Sanh, but they were 60 of the roughest and most isolated kilometers in all of the war-torn country. Khe Sanh's location near the borders of the two Vietnams and Laos made it an ideal site to set up a camp to monitor North Vietnamese activity on the nearby Ho Chi Minh Trail. A team of U.S. Army Special Forces, sporting their famed Green Berets, first arrived in the isolated village in the summer of 1962. Their mission? Recruit and train local Bru tribesmen for a militia force that could patrol the mountains that hid the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Though occasional supply runs into Hue were made by truck, the Green Berets depended upon a nearby airstrip for regular resupply. Situated on a long, narrow plateau a few kilometers north of the village, the airstrip had originally been hacked out of the jungle by French colonial troops in 1949. Soon after the Americans arrived, ARVN engineers lengthened the runway so it could accept larger cargo planes. The Green Berets relocated their camp to the airstrip in the fall of 1964. Unfortunately, several nearby mountain peaks gave enemy observers an excellent view of the airstrip and the new camp. Hill 1015 sits 4 kilometers directly north, rising sharply in a distinctive shape that earned it the nickname Tiger Tooth Mountain. 1 kilometer to its west is Hill 950. On military topographical maps, hills are identified by their height, above sea level, in meters. 4.5 kilometers northwest of the airstrip sits Hill 861, actually one of 3 peaks that make up a major hill mass located off the west end of the runway. The other 2 peaks rise to the same height and were known as Hills 881 North and 881 South. The Green Berets and their indigenous troops spent the next 6 months constructing a number of permanent buildings, including a large central command bunker, 4 corner bunkers, and about 15 other buildings that included a dispensary, mess hall, and barracks. By the time they finished, Khe Sanh had become the largest Allied base in far northern South Vietnam, and none too soon. Responding to the edict from Westmoreland, Walt issued orders on 27 March 1966 for the 1st Battalion 1st Marines, then operating near Phu Bai, to conduct a search-and-destroy mission around Khe Sanh. Although 1-1's commander, Lieutenant Colonel Van D. Bell, Jr., planned for his Operation Virginia to begin on 3 April 1966, bad weather at Khe Sanh grounded the transport planes. They did not arrive until 17 April. On 18 April, helicopters ferried the men of Charlie 1-1 to blocking positions approximately 6 kilometers north of the base. The following day, Bell's 2 other rifle companies, Alpha and Bravo, were airlifted to a landing zone 9 kilometers east of Charlie. For the next 3 days, these 2 companies hacked their way westward through dense vegetation and over rugged terrain. They reached Charlie without encountering the enemy. Based on this, and the negative reports of his long-range recon patrols that had already searched the northwest quadrant, Bell canceled the rest of Operation Virginia. Bell's reports to 3MAF gave Walt's staff an excellent opportunity to prove to Westmoreland that no NVA were operating in the area. 3MAF ordered Bell to march his battalion east out of Khe Sanh along Route 9. It was part tactical maneuver and part publicity stunt, but mostly it was Walt making his point. In an attempt to beat the oppressive heat and humidity, 1-1 began its march at midnight on 26 April. It did not work. The rugged terrain and enervating temperatures so sapped the troops that instead of covering the 50 kilometers in 3 days, they took 5. Not until 30 April did the column of Marines stagger into Cam Lo, 12 kilometers west of Dong Ha. Generals Westmoreland and Walt were on hand to greet the weary men. The Marines took full advantage of the event, proudly and loudly proclaiming Bell's battalion to be the largest force in 8 years to hike all the way down Route 9. Unfortunately, Bell's efforts proved inconclusive. The Marines had not seen any North Vietnamese, but that didn't mean they weren't there. And although Walt felt vindicated, upcoming events would temper his feelings of satisfaction. Upon Bell's return, Walt turned his attention back to improving his pacification programs. However, in mid-May, intelligence sources reported an enemy buildup in the eastern DMZ area, primarily north and east of Dong Ha. They were right. On 19 May, strong NVA forces attacked 2 ARVN outposts, Jiu Lin.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?